What's up, guys? Welcome back to After the Credits, the review show that no one asked for. Today we are talking about Atomic Heart. I was really lured into playing this game because of the Atomic Heart 2 reveal trailer that we got earlier this year. I thought it looked really interesting, so because of that, I decided to play the original, and we got done with it. So that's what we're going to be discussing today. Thanks for joining me again. Let's dive right into the content. So the short and sweet version of the story here is that Atomic Heart takes place in a alternate reality version of Russia in the 1950s. You play as P3, a comrade major that is working with a Dr. Sechenov, who is developing a bunch of robots. And as you can see throughout this game, Russia's really much further ahead in their development of robots than they even are today, with fully functional robots, speaking robots, and things like that. And essentially, the initiative is called the Collective, where they want to release all of these autonomous drones to replace hard labor and basically manual labor jobs, so that way the residents of Russia and all across the world can prioritize their energy on education and scientific studies, as opposed to having those hard-working, hard labor jobs. However, essentially, an individual named Petrov activated the robots and turned them into combat mode, which essentially sends these robots out to slaughter all of the residents within Russia, essentially, because that's where they're combined, or where they're collected at this time. And this is kind of the big plot device throughout the game, is that Russia's developing all these robots. They're sending all these robots across the world, especially to the United States after the loss of World War II. And no one really knew that these autonomous robots had a combat mode. So it leads to a very interesting plot point where the game leads you to believe that this is all designed as a way to infiltrate the United States and take them down from the inside once they get used to using these robots. So I think for the story, it's a very interesting story, however, a little bit over my head. I'm not going to lie to you. I've talked about this on a few other reviews that I've made throughout this series, but I don't know if I have undiagnosed ADHD or what exactly my issue is, but almost after every game that I play through, I have to then go onto YouTube and watch a video talking about the story again, just to kind of fit all the pieces together. That definitely happened here in this game. I was able to follow like the basic plot structure throughout the game, but there's a lot of minute details that I missed that watching a YouTube video helps me out with. And again, that's just a personal issue. It could just be me without a doubt, but definitely something I wanted to mention here. But what I will say as a negative as far as the story goes is that a lot of the story is presented to you through long dialogue dumps, essentially, during gameplay. And I just do not like the way the story is presented in that manner. It's very hard to prioritize and compartmentalize my brain while I'm playing a game and then having to try to digest all these story bits being thrown at me while I'm doing the sort of thing. So I think the story here is actually interesting, very good, especially after watching a recap video and gathering all the pieces together. But that short description should be enough to kind of give you the general gist of what the game is going for. Now, the gameplay in this game is quite unique in my opinion, and it's not really at all what I expected. I went into this game kind of expecting Doom, Wolfenstein, that sort of gameplay, like a boomer shooter is kind of what I was expecting going into it. And it is kind of a boomer shooter in a way, but it leans a lot more heavily on the survival aspects, which kind of took me by surprise. You are given a lot of weapons that are fun and very nice to use, and combat actually feels rather good, but you find that you don't have a lot of ammo for these encounters a lot of the time. So it's not like a massive run and gun game where you can just blow things to pieces. You spend a lot of time crafting bullets, running out of those bullets, and then switching to your melee weapon, which ends up being where the majority of your damage you deal comes from, is your melee weapon. Now, there is a large variety of weapons that you can craft, melee weapons and, you know, kinetic rifles and things like that, and electric rifles and pistols. There's a large variety of stuff, and I will say that the gunplay visually feels pretty good. I do think it's a little bit clunky though. Just I wasn't ever really able to get the sensitivity right when I was playing the game. It always kind of felt a little stiff, so that was a little bit of a bummer. But visually, I think it looks good. It feels good to shoot the weapons. It's very fun to deal the damage. I think the enemies are actually very fun to battle and fight, especially the robots. I think they're really, really fun, and they're designed. The robot enemies are designed in such a way that it is really satisfying to just beat their ass with melee weapons. So kind of gives Dying Light vibes. I know I didn't play a lot of Dying Light, the original, but I know that a lot of that game took place around melee combat. And that's kind of what this game feels like as well. You're able to kind of swing your axe, is what you start off with, is a big axe, and you can kind of like chop limbs off, and you're kind of like really hitting things hard and staggering them, and I'm kind of going down a rabbit hole here, but I think the combat overall is actually quite good. I just wasn't really a big fan that it was more survival focused as opposed to just being a straight up boomer shooter. I think it would be better if they just went in that direction, but again, that's not what's here, so it doesn't matter. I can wish for whatever the fuck I want, but if it's not here, it doesn't really matter. Either way, I think the gameplay, for the most part, is quite good. Another thing that kind of ties this game to other boomer shooters, which this game is not, just discussed it, but again, it just makes it feel like it should be, is that your main character, P3, is kind of vulgar, you know what I mean? He's a very rage-filled guy. He has a lot of quirky one-liners and things like that, very similar to like Duke Nukem or what you would hear from Doom Guy or BJ Blazkowicz from Wolfenstein. He has all those one-liners and things in there to make him seem arrogant and edgy, I guess you would say, but it's just interesting because he never has ammo, it seems like. I gotta rephrase that. Towards the end of the game, I had plenty of ammo. I had plenty of materials to craft ammo, and it kind of became the boomer shooter, but at the beginning of the game, it's very melee focused, and that just kind of overwhelmingly took my brain. But yes, he wants to be BJ Blazkowicz so fucking bad. He wants to be Duke Nukem so fucking bad, and it's just kind of hilarious throughout the entire playthrough, hearing him make these quirky one-liners. You can see where that inspiration was pulled from, and it's just crazy. Kind of cringy, though, I will say. It's not the greatest. Especially P3's catchphrase. He calls everything crispy critters, and I think that is potentially the most cringy thing of all time. You would almost expect explicit language. Call him something, anything else other than crispy critters, but he says crispy critters like 40 times in this game, and it's just like, of all the things, crispy critters? I mean, okay, I guess, but I mean, you could have chose anything else. Give me a profanity in there or something. Anything would have been better. Call them fucking clunkers or something different than crispy critters. Okay, so sticking with the gameplay here, I also want to touch base on the puzzles in this game. I would say for the first 3/4 of the playthrough or so, the game is about 50-50 combat and then puzzles, but I'm not sure if the puzzles get increasingly difficult depending on the skill level that you choose to play the game on. Once again, I played this game on normal, so baseline experience as I usually do. And the puzzles in this game were absolutely easy peasy. I mean, like, there was almost no thought that went into any of them, and there was quite a few of them. Now, that being said, my personal preference, I don't like a hard puzzle. I don't like having to think a lot when I'm playing a game, just my preference. So I wasn't really too upset about it, but the overwhelming amount of puzzles that were very, very easy felt a little bit weird to me. They do touch upon this in the story a little bit. They essentially say that all the puzzles in the game are designed to be sort of mini Turing tests, which ties back into, you know, the robots and the humans. So essentially, if you don't know what a Turing test is, it's basically a very simple quiz or test that you would take to prove that you are in fact human and not robot. So it's got very, very simple answers for a human to figure out, but theoretically it would be much more difficult for a robot to figure it out. So they kind of have a little lore explanation as to why the puzzles are so easy, but I just would have liked to have seen a lot less, because it was very heavily puzzle focused for a good chunk of the game, and they were kind of mind-numbing, to be fair. So I don't know. That's just my preference, but I do want to mention that as well. There is some puzzle work in this game. I also want to mention quickly the keybinds and just the controls as well. This is kind of separate from the gameplay for me, but this game feels, I mean, I already mentioned that the camera movement and things, I had a hard time dialing sensitivity in and never really felt like I got it right, but on top of that, weapon switching in this game was a massive issue for me for a long portion of the game. It wants you to use the D-pad left and right to select your weapons. I didn't learn till much later in the game you can hold square and pull up a weapon wheel. So I was constantly flipping through weapons with my D-pad, and I was carrying like 5 weapons at a time. So for me to get from one weapon to the other, I'd have to fucking hammer that thing trying to get to it while I'm getting attacked by all this shit. And it was just really, really clunky and really not really very intuitive is the best way that I would put it. But once I discovered the weapon wheel, it got a little better, but it's just a weird keybind. I think having a weapon wheel on holding square is a little strange, all things considered. It doesn't feel natural, and just wasn't the most intuitive thing. I don't know. I don't know if I missed a pop-up box talking about the weapon wheel earlier, but I literally had no clue it was there until I was trying to insert a cartridge into my rifle, because I knew that I got a cartridge slot unlocked and couldn't figure out how to put the cartridge in, and then I had to look it up and it told me how to open the weapon wheel. So I don't know. I know that this game has a lot of different mechanics, so it's hard for them to figure out where they wanted to put it, but I just didn't really like its implementation in this game. I mean, to be fair, you do have abilities on triangle, you have abilities on the bumpers. Triggers are obviously used for weapons and, you know, holding, charging up melee attacks or aiming down sights and things like that. So a lot of your controller is utilized in this game. I just don't like how it was implemented at the end of the day. I don't know how they could have fixed it. I'm not a developer, but I just felt a little clunky to me, to be honest. All right, enough combat discussion and gameplay discussion. Let's talk about the atmosphere. I think that's where this game shines the most, to be honest. You can absolutely see the inspiration from BioShock here and everything about it. I mean, I was streaming this game multiple times, and everybody that came in that had not seen the game before mentioned BioShock. So very inspired by BioShock, including a late game scene that happens way later that you can clearly see. They go down an elevator shaft into under a water tower, and you see basically this village underwater, and the guy refers to it as the Rapture. I mean, just super inspired by BioShock, and there's not a problem with that at all. On top of the atmosphere, I absolutely love this setting. I think that a 1950s Russia that is more technologically advanced than we are even today just really gives this interesting contrast to the way the game looks and plays. It's very, very unique, very cool, and I really like this. I think it's very appealing. I don't think a lot of games go down this route, and this fit this game beautifully. And on top of the atmosphere, the sound design in this game is also absolutely impeccable. They chose a lot of old-timey songs to kind of fit that vibe, to make you feel like you were back in the 50s. That stuff was all rather impressive and very, very good and immersive for that. And then obviously you're clunking and clanking and shooting and all of that stuff, very much on point as well. So sound design, fantastic. Atmosphere, above fantastic. I think this game's got one of the greatest atmospheres I've ever experienced, and that's from a guy that has not played BioShock. So take it or leave it, I suppose. But yes, very, very cool in those aspects, without a question. That's going to really do it for this one. I've kind of touched on everything that I want to touch upon for Atomic Heart. If you have any questions or want to talk about anything in specific, consider commenting down below and I'll answer or talk about any of that stuff. Again, I want to keep these brief and relatively spoiler free for those of you that are interested in checking the game out for yourself, but that's my goal either way. All that being said, it's time to give it a rating. You know, we use the S through Cheeks tier list here, and right after beating the game, my heart went to C. So that's where it's going to be. It's going to be a C tier game. 5 out of 10. Easily could get a 6 out of 10. I don't think it's anything really crazy. A lot of what dings it, even though the atmosphere and sound design and the story I thought were great after I looked it up, to really put the pieces together. Combat just felt a little too clunky for me, to be fair, and I didn't really like P3's personality. It just felt overly edgy, I guess I would say, and that catchphrase sucks. I mean, of all the catchphrases, stinks. So for me, ultimately, gaming is about the gameplay, and I just found this one to be a little too clunky for my liking. So I will give it a C. That being said, I am still relatively excited for Atomic Heart 2 to see what they do to progress the story and move it forward. But yeah, this game's a mid-game for me. Just a C-tier game, and I'm pretty confident with that position. Alright guys, thanks so much for watching again. I appreciate it. We went back-to-back with After the Credits 2 weeks in a row. Pretty impressive, I gotta say. So happy about that. I would not expect another one for a couple weeks or so. I'm playing through Death Stranding next, and that's a long game. Also, yeah, I'm not even close to being done with it. So it just happened to line up nice to get Sly 3 done and Atomic Heart done back-to-back, but it's gonna be a little hiatus for a while until we get Death Stranding, the original, done. Other than that, though, I'll still be uploading Golden Tee, maybe Soulstone Survivors, maybe, I don't know, I might be dropping that. And you might see a character that we developed in a fighting game come back too in a really unique way. So stick tuned for that if that happens. I'm working on it, potentially, theorizing some ideas, but I'll have to wait and see for that. Other than that, that's it though. Hope you guys enjoyed. Thanks so much for watching. Consider leaving a like if you liked the video. Comment down below your questions or game recommendations as usual. I would really appreciate it. And consider subscribing to the channel, trying to hit 300 by the end of the year. We're pretty close. So if we can do that, I would be very grateful. Other than that, though, that is it for me. Take care of yourselves. I love you all. We will see you guys on the next one.